Email is one of the most effective forms of marketing communication, with studies showing that we prefer organizations to reach us via email over social media, direct mail, and mobile apps. And in a recent study of millennials by Barna, email addresses are the form of contact info millennials are most willing to share. But email communication is only truly effective if we're sending the right messages at the right time. And even in a small church environment, this can take a ton of our time. So on this episode of the MyCom Church Marketing Podcast, we're discussing a solution to this problem, email automation. Thank you, everybody, for listening. My name is Dan Wunderlich. I'm a United Methodist pastor, and joining us for today's episode is Kenny Jang, who has too many awesome job titles to sum up all that he does. Basically, Kenny is one of the true gurus of church communications, and one of my favorite projects of his is a recent project called Church Butler, a social media resource and training service for churches. Kenny, thanks so much for being with us today.
Oh, great to be with you today. Awesome.
Well, I found another interesting statistic. A whopping 52.7% of American adults check their personal email more than 10 times per day. Wow. And Kenny, I'm wondering, are you in that 52% or are you in the minority who has a little bit more self-control when it comes to email?
I don't know how many times I check per day, but you know what? In 2018, I have committed myself to inbox zero, if you know what that means.
Yes, that is a dream of many folks, but it's hard to get to, especially if you use your inbox as a to-do list.
Absolutely. But yes, we are all addicted to email. And that just, I think if you look at it from the other point, from the publisher's point of view, email is still one of those, I call it the killer app. You think about trying to get to your audiences via social media, Twitter, Facebook, et cetera. But if you have permission to be in someone's email inbox, that still is the killer app, the killer way that you can have conversations to nurture and, get engaged with your audiences.
So would you say that email really truly for an organization that wants to build relationships with folks, do you think that's the most effective channel for churches and similar ministries to work through?
Absolutely. And it's it's the black sheep of all the tools out there, right? So you look at even e-commerce and all the marketplace, spaces, email is still the most productive channel overall in terms of getting your consumers, your constituents, your audiences to do what you want them to do. In nonprofit world, it's the same thing. Email is still the ROI for email for donations and volunteering and getting commitments from your constituents, again, is one of the highest ROI channels out there. So we've got all this hype, and it's very, it's sexy to talk about social media all day. But if you don't have an email strategy in place first, I always say you need to start from ground zero, and that's where we begin.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I think of my own habits, I certainly follow a ton of people on social media, and that can be a really noisy area. But I get a small number of newsletters delivered to my inbox. Usually some come about 5 o'clock in the morning, some come about 10 o'clock in the morning. And I have this small collection of websites that I know that I want to keep up with. And I have found that I keep up with them better via email than social media. And so even looking at my own habits, it seems like I should be leaning on email in my ministry more than I do.
Absolutely. I'm sure that we can find, 1, 2, half a dozen within the next week that you could put into place of trying to figure out how to use email much more efficiently so that it even frees up your time. I think that's one of the big benefits that probably everyone here listening today can take away from.
Absolutely. We're always looking for more time when it comes to ministry. Well, okay, let's start by defining and perhaps even demystifying the term automation. Kenny, what do you mean when you talk about email automation?
Yeah, so automation at its simplest is being able to be strategic with your communications when you use email as that form. And so being able to pre-write messages and then schedule them to go out to your recipients, whether it be one person, 10 people, or your entire email list, so that you have control over what messages get sent out. And that really affords you to be consistent in how you interact with your different groups across all of your email lists.
Well, and no doubt this is a concept that may be intimidating to some folks, especially if you don't currently work with an email provider service. If you're just using a church management system or maybe even a personal Gmail address and haven't even jumped into something like MailChimp, this can seem like, that the meme of confused looking celebrities with all those math formulas flying around their heads. And I'll admit that there was a time in the not so distant past where I thought automation was way beyond what I could handle. But I use MailChimp for my personal ministry email list, and they've added automation to the free level. So this is something that more and more people are using. They're trying to make more and more accessible. Can you explain why this is something that even small membership churches can get excited about?
Oh, it's, again, at the end of the day, we got to understand as communicators, what's our purpose and objective. And if it really is to serve our community members and to be able to share with them messaging and content and resources, then email is a great delivery mechanism so that we can do that in a way that's strategic. Again, something that's intentional rather than just opportunistic and responsive. And so, tools like MailChimp that do offer automation now is hopefully going to increase the number of ministries out there that are going to take a look at it and start from scratch. And honestly, I think you have to start from square one, be very, very simplistic in your expectations and execute one automation schedule and see how it goes. And I guarantee you'll see the results, and it will only encourage you and light some creativity for you to think, how else can we use this in our ministry?
We'll get into a couple specific examples. You have a really great list of examples that churches can put into practice. But for churches that want to start, how should they structure their email list? Should they have more than one list, or should they look for a tool like MailChimp that allows segments or tagging? Basically, how do we get a user or members of our church into specific automation sequences? If you can explain that concisely, that would be great.
So one of the core concepts of marketing is, your job basically is to segment and categorize your people. The more you segment them, the more you're able to define common qualities across different people on your list, the better you're going to be able to deliver information that's relevant to them at the right time, right? So your job is to continuously segment. Whether you do that manually on an Excel spreadsheet or you actually use one of these email providers. And I think, like you mentioned, there really is no excuse not to use email marketing software at this point, because there are providers like MailChimp that offer free accounts. If you have, I believe right now, if it's 2,000 or less that you have on your email list, then you get full access to MailChimp, and you can use it for free. So if you are a church that's running 100 to 200 to 300 to 500, right, anything under 2,000, you should be looking at tools like MailChimp that give you, and it's not a free trial. It's that you can use it in perpetuity with the free version to start. So yes, segmenting is how you start. One of the great ways to look at it is look at your ministry, how your sub-ministries are organized in your church. Do you have a men's group? Do you have a women's group? Do you have a youth group? Do you have a specific discipleship group or small groups? A certain percentage of people are in your small groups. Within that, are there small group leaders? Right. So those are the different types of categorizations that I think you should start to think about. Just look at how you're organized naturally in your church. And that's the first step we usually take in terms of segmenting people and tagging people.
And now from our sponsor. Abingdon Press has just released their latest study, a part of their Disciple Fast Track series. It's called Remember Who You Are. It's a great study of the prophets and letters of Paul. So, hear the call, accept the challenge. You can visit cokesbury.com/disciple to learn more about it and see all the other studies in the Disciple family. That's cokesbury.com/disciple.
So now that we have an idea of how to get folks into a specific sequence or onto a specific list, you have 5 great examples for us. The first one is an automated series for first-time guest follow-up.
Yes, I think this is one of the most thrilling things that some pastors experience when we help them set up an automation. So you get first-time visitors, first-time guests to your church. Most of the time, many churches have a clipboard or some type of connection card, right? There's a visitor welcome form, intake form that you ask to collect information. Now, one of the things that the rants that I have is there's so many churches that have those things and then they don't do anything with the information right after you collect them, right, Dan?
Yeah.
And so let's be real. If you're going to collect information, you should use it. If you're not going to use the information, take it off the form or the connection card. You don't want to inundate people with, like an interrogation just because they showed up for the first time. But basically, You should be doing something with that email. And again, this is relationship building and nurturing. We're using technology to scale personal relationships. It's very important to think of it that way. We're using technology to be able to scale our personal relationships. And so what you're able to do is take that first-time guest, and then what's the first natural thing to do? You would thank them for coming. So what you would do is pre-write some sort of thank you gesture that says, hey, we know you have choices on Sunday. Thank you so much for visiting with us. We really hope you had a good time here. Hopefully the message was impactful and that you resonated with it. And then maybe tell a little bit about yourself, right? So that might be the first email that gets out of the gate. And then there are other types of emails that you probably would want to send them if you're in some sort of relationship with them and that you're corresponding via email. There might be a reminder, a gentle reminder, maybe the next Saturday or the following Saturday that says, hey, you came by recently. Tomorrow on Sunday, we're going to have another service. I'd love to see you, meet you in person, take you out for coffee or something like that, right? So those are the types of messages that you can pre-write that's applicable to pretty much all first-time guests. And that way, then you can use, again, the technology to have it automated, delivered on a schedule that makes sense. So again, you don't want to be weird. You don't want to inundate them with emails every day and try to be a stalker.
Right.
That type of this software allows you to say, hey, one day after they get put on this email list, let's send this message. 7 days after, 14 days after, 3 months after, 1 year after, you're able to schedule different messages out there. So this is definitely one of the largest impactful ways for you can turn first-time visitors into repeat attenders. My team, we recently set up an automation series that goes 1 full year after someone visits the first time.
Wow.
And so those are the types of things that I encourage people to think about. Again, it's not all about you. You're going to do things that's conversational. You're going to send messages that might be open-ended. You might be talking about things that are in your town, not just your church. It might be sharing some of your best sermons ever that are the most popular on your website. So there's many types of things that you would probably talk about with a first-time guest to nurture them and cultivate that relationship so that they have a chance of eventually coming back over and over and over again.
And now from our sponsor. Churches that recently switched to United Methodist Insurance saved an average of $423. Visit uminsure.org. That's uminsure.org to request a quote today. United Methodist Insurance, it's property and casualty insurance for your ministry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to bring up one of the maybe challenges to email automation that some people may feel, or perhaps if they're a staff member, maybe there might be pushback from another staff member or even the pastor, is that email automation depersonalizes email. But I remember sitting on, every Monday morning, essentially copying and pasting from my Gmail account the sent thank you emails from the previous week and just pasting them into a new window the next Monday. There are only so many ways that you can thank people. And certainly if you do it one by one, and if you have met people and you might remember something about them, you could always throw in, I'm so glad that you got a new job in the area or something like that. But honestly, it's not. We're already depersonalizing so much of what we do by copying and pasting because there are only so many ways to thank people.
Yeah, and absolutely. And the other thing that I think people forget then really is they think that if you have a schedule of 10 emails that are going to be automated and sent out over the next, say, 3 months, that you are locked into that conversation. They forget that if we write those emails really well, that is on a personal basis, one-to-one, not corporate and not sterile, you can't send 10 emails to somebody without somebody replying back in a conversation, right?
Right.
And that's when you have the ability to go off script and really personalize it and say, hey, I remember you talked about you're a trumpet player and the jazz band is playing in town. You can bring up little things that you know about that person in that reply and conversation. And so I think that's something we just need to underscore here, that once you're setting up these sequences automated, you're not committing yourself to that's the only thing that you're ever going to talk to these constituents or, the people on your list.
Exactly. And a more general email principle that I've heard you share other places is that these emails, to make them feel more personal, should be coming from the email address of a staff member, if possible, not from info@mychurch.com or admin@mychurch.com. But it really helps if it comes from a staff member with their name
absolutely.
on the email, right?
First of all, people have relationships with people, not institutions. Right? People have relationships with people, not institutions. And, just even empirically, when I was at Liquid Church, we had a database of about 8,000 people we would send a weekly email to. And it came from info@Liquid Church. What we did is we revamped it and we segmented the list by campuses. It's a multi-site church. And then we had the from address as listed as the person who's in charge of connections. There's a connections coordinator on every campus. And so that person's email address became the reply to email address for each campus. Two things happened. One, our open rates shot up by 20 to one campus was 40% higher.
That's
right?
amazing.
Because we're all trained. We get spam from corporate addresses. But when you get a personal email address from someone, you're more likely to open it up. The second issue is that people started to reply. They start to compliment things that they saw on Sunday. They used to ask questions, so much so that one of the connections coordinators said, she doesn't have time for all these replies. There's so many replies coming back on a weekly basis.
What a problem to have,
right? When you actually have engagement with the people on your list. So yes, you need to personalize and humanize that relationship. Again, I don't think we can hammer it enough. You're using technology to scale personal relationships.
Awesome. Well, your other 4 examples are volunteer training, lead magnets, Bible studies or devotionals, and celebrating things like birthdays and anniversaries. Real quickly, are any of those maybe a good second step for a church to look at?
My favorite is birthday messages or other celebrations. So set up what we do. This is typically one of the first ones that we do. So we ask the church that we're working with, can you write like 10 different birthday messages? So if in any given year, what would you write in a specific birthday message? And then what we do is we automate that says year 1 on the birthday, send this message, year 2, year 3, so that you've got 10 years, you got a decade's worth of birthday messages set up. And then what we'll do is we'll send it sometimes a day before, on the day, 2 days before, something like that, where the message will say, hey, I know your birthday's coming up this week. I just want to make sure you have a fantastic week. I want to be the first to say happy birthday to you, right? That might be one year where we schedule it a couple days earlier. Another year might be, 6 a.m. Hey, I just woke up. I just want to make sure you have a great day, right? I want to be the first. There's different ways of doing that to personalize that experience instead of just a sterile happy birthday message, right? You can have fun with it. But again, technology allows you to do that so that everyone gets that. And then by sitting down and writing 3, 4, 5, maybe 10, you got the next 10 years satisfied in terms of unique messages to your database.
That's great. Well, Kenny, thank you so much for your time and wisdom today. This all sounds like great stuff we can start implementing at our ministries.
Definitely.
And now, listeners, we want to hear from you. How does your church utilize email? And do you have any ideas to add to Kenny's list of automation possibilities for your ministry? Email us at podcast@umcom.org, and we just might share your ideas on a future episode. And of course, you can use that email podcast@umcom.org to send us any feedback or topic suggestions you have for the show. We'd love to hear from you. Finally, if you have found this podcast to be helpful and you'd like to make sure other church communicators like yourself find this resource, the 2 biggest things you can do are share this episode with your friends and colleagues and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, or whatever service you're listening to right now. Thanks again for joining us on the MyCom Church Marketing Podcast.